Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you've never seen any of my videos before, I'm Devin. This is just a mental note, and I use this channel to talk about my personal experiences with mental illness and physical illness on a day-to-day basis. I also have my bachelor's in psychology, and I'm working on my master's in mental health counseling. So I do use my educational background to teach you guys as well about mental health. Now, as you can tell by the title of the video, I'm going to be telling you guys today all about my autoimmune disease and how I was diagnosed. Now, if you're a little squeamish, you may want to skip by this one. I'm going to try to keep things as vague as possible, but I do also want to accurately portray to you guys what happened. And for those of you who don't know already, I have an autoimmune disease that affects my digestive system, and some of the symptoms are a little gross. We're going to be talking about poop a little bit. Maybe a lot. So if that's something that you can't handle, you might want to click on to the next video. However, I would really like for you to stick around, learn a little bit about this disease and kind of about the diagnosis process for it. Sadie's coming in. Come on. All right. Apparently, we got a helper with today's story. This is Sadie, for everybody who doesn't know, and she's gonna, here, we'll take your collar off so that way you can't jingle jangle. This is normally her chair, I stole it. All right. You ready to tell the story? Yeah, you weren't there. I don't know if you've heard this story before, baby girl. It'll be new for you too. Before I get into my diagnosis story, I wanted to explain to you all what ulcerative colitis is. Now, ulcerative colitis is an autoimmune disease, which means that instead of protecting the body, my immune system attacks my body. Specifically with ulcerative colitis, it attacks the inner lining of my large intestine. Now, this can cause a lot of problems, mostly ulcers, which is the ulcerative part. Colitis simply means inflammation of the colon. So the name of the disease means that there's inflammation of the colon and there's ulcers there. Now, this causes a lot of pain and nausea. It can cause very frequent bowel movements. When I finally went to the hospital, I was probably going to the bathroom at least 20 times a day. So very frequent diarrhea. There's usually blood in the stool or mucus. That's probably about as graphic as I'm going to get. So if anybody was worried about how graphic I was going to get with the symptoms, that's as bad as it's going to get. There's also a lot of problems that occur outside the digestive tract that are like complications of the disease. My doctor believes that I have a type of arthritis that is a complication of ulcerative colitis. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it causes joint inflammation in your large joints. So I have really bad joint pain in my shoulders, hips, and knees. Luckily, the type of arthritis that is connected with ulcerative colitis, and if I can remember to research it, I will put up the actual name here. It doesn't cause actual joint damage, it just causes pain. So it's not as bad as it could be. Thank you. Yes, mommy's in pain sometimes and you want to help. Other complications that can arise because of ulcerative colitis include eye problems. Now, I don't think my eye problems are because of that, because I needed glasses way predating when I started having symptoms of colitis. But people can have vision problems, a lot of joint problems, as I mentioned before. Speaking of joint problems, I've also had bursitis a few times, which is a inflammation of the fluid sac in your joints. I've had it in my shoulders and in my hips. The only way to get those to go away really is around steroids. It's not fun. I couldn't walk for like a week because I had it in both of my hips at the same time. Another thing that may just be me, but according to some Facebook groups that I'm a part of, other people have said that like they've experienced this too. I also have no sort of temperature regulation. If you saw when I sat down, I have a onesie on, but it's only halfway on because it was too hot when it was up. But when it's just on my legs, it's just right. So I get hot and cold very easily. I'm constantly putting on and taking off layers constantly. It drives my husband insane because like one second I will be in a t-shirt and shorts and the next second I will be bundled up in 3 blankets just because I got a cold chill. I have no sense of body temperature regulation. My body doesn't do it for itself. I kind of have to ebb and flow and adjust my clothing as the day goes on. There are also a lot of complications revolving around the side effects of the medications for this disease. A lot of the medications are immunosuppressants, which leaves the person who's taking that medication very vulnerable to a lot of diseases, other diseases, like viruses, bacteria, those types of things, which is why I have not left my house except to go to the doctor, or well, I haven't left my apartment complex except to go to the doctor in over 4 months, because I take medication that suppresses my immune system, and which makes me very, very highly susceptible to other illnesses such as COVID. Now, ulcerative colitis is very similar to another autoimmune disease called Crohn's disease, which a lot more people have heard of. They're both the main types, or I believe they're the only types, of inflammatory bowel disease, which is like the umbrella term, which means your bowels are inflamed. Yeah. Crohn's disease attacks the entire digestive system and can attack any lining, like any part of the organ. So they can attack the inner lining, they can attack the outermost lining, it doesn't really matter. So Crohn's has more freedom to attack different places in the body, whereas colitis is limited to the colon and the inner lining, the most inner lining of the colon. But that doesn't mean that Crohn's is always more severe than ulcerative colitis is. You could have a person with very mild Crohn's disease and a person with very severe ulcerative colitis. So it honestly just depends. Okay, bye. It honestly just depends on each person's case as to which one is worse. Because I know a lot of times people are like, well, Crohn's can go anywhere in the body. It automatically has to be worse, but that really isn't the case. I've met people with Crohn's with much less severe cases than I have, where they only had to cut a few things out of their diet and they're fine. But I've also met people with Crohn's disease who have had multiple surgeries, and I have not had any surgeries yet. I believe the statistic of people with inflammatory bowel disease that will eventually end up having surgery because of their condition is around 80%. But I could be completely wrong. However, I do know that surgeries are very, very common with these diseases. So I'm lucky in the case that I am now, oh my goodness, how many years in? Almost 8 years in, and I haven't had to have any surgery. So I am very lucky, knock on wood, here's wood. Knock on wood, because I don't want to have to do that. Now that I've told you guys a little bit about ulcerative colitis, if you'd like a more in-depth, detailed video, I can always do that, just let me know. But I think I've given you enough information in this video to kind of follow along with my story of how I got diagnosed. I'm going to start by setting up the timeline for you guys a little bit. My first symptoms started the summer before my senior year of high school, so that would have been summer 2011. I got diagnosed in January 2013. So it was about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, from the first symptom I had to an actual diagnosis. That was kind of my fault, and we'll get to that in a minute. But going back to summer 2011, I was working with my mom doing simple data entry at the company that she worked at. It was a summer job, just kind of make some money, get me out of the house. And it was boring. It was really, really boring. And I hated my boss, and not my mom. Well, that's a complicated relationship and something I will also get into later. But my mom was not my boss. My boss just was awful, and she would tell me to do one thing and then somebody would tell me to do something else. It was really confusing. Anyways, I spent a lot of time hiding in the bathroom that summer because I just did not want to be there. And I remember one time I went to the bathroom and I looked down because it kind of felt funny. And I don't know how to describe it other than things were slipping a little more than they should. And I looked down and it looked, again, trying not to get too graphic. What was in there was covered in a white sheen, which I learned later was mucus. And mucus is the first thing that gets kind of sent off from these ulcers before they start bleeding. So your immune system starts attacking the inner lining of the large intestine. The first thing that comes out is typically mucus, and then after that you get blood. So this is early warning signs. I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, that's weird. But I was also 17 and really self-conscious. In the past eight-ish years, I've had to get really comfortable talking about my bowel movements and my poop and all of those things. But back then, never. So I just was like, oh, that's weird, and kept on going. And this happened, I mean, it didn't happen every time I went to the bathroom, but it started happening more and more and more, which makes sense because the disease was progressing. So even though these symptoms were becoming more common, I was getting them more often, I didn't really think anything of it. Again, I was embarrassed to talk to somebody. I was 17, not really comfortable about talking about my bodily functions yet. But I also didn't have health insurance at the time. And that's a whole nother story. Again, that's a story time I can give you, which is crazy. But yeah, from the time I was, I think, 15 until I was almost 19, I did not have any health insurance. And that really deterred me from getting any sort of help. I genuinely believed that if I wasn't in pain, if I could still do my everyday activities, that I didn't need to go to the doctor because I couldn't afford to go to the doctor. Now, I did have a little bit of money coming in from that summer job. And then after that summer, I got the job at a restaurant that I actually ended up working at for almost 8 years. Weirdly enough, the owner of the restaurant also has ulcerative colitis, and so does his daughter. So he was incredible with this entire thing when I got sick. So I was working, I was making a little bit of money, but my mom kind of drilled into me that like we couldn't afford to go to the doctor. As time went on, it became more consistent. Almost every time I went to the bathroom, I could see that white stuff in it. I started to get a little bit worried, especially once there started to be blood. I actually remember telling her one time, I was like, hey, Mom, like every time I go to the bathroom, there's blood there. And she was like, oh, it's just hemorrhoids. You need to eat more vegetables. And if you guys have seen my What I Eat in a Day video, actually, I don't even think that's up yet. So when you guys see my What I Eat in a Day video, you'll see that vegetables are one of the worst things for me. She obviously didn't know that at the time, but I remember her telling me, we can't afford to go to the doctor, just eat more vegetables, it's probably hemorrhoids, you'll be fine in a few weeks. So I let it go. I also just want to put a little note here that my mom worked in the medicine field. She wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but she was a pharmaceutical representative, and she was in and out of doctors' offices every day. Her job was essentially to sell prescriptions to different doctors, to get doctors to give out prescriptions of her specific medication to their patients. Now you can judge the ethics of that or whatever you want, but in my mind, my mom was kind of like, she was a medical professional. She wasn't a doctor, but she literally worked with doctors all day, every day. So if she told me that I was gonna be okay, then I was just like, okay, I guess that's it. Like, I'll be fine. Obviously, things just didn't get all dandy and fine once I started eating my veggies, because hemorrhoids weren't even the problem. Vegetables make everything worse. And really the only treatments for autoimmune diseases are medications. You can try to handle it through lifestyle, but not at the point that I was at. So I wasn't doing anything to help, and my disease only got worse. I kept getting sicker and sicker, but I kept believing I'm not in pain. My mom specifically told me we didn't have the money. Like, I'm not gonna bring this up. I was in denial for a really, really long time. A really long time. I was going around just being like, I don't know why I'm losing weight. I don't know why I can't eat. I'm just not hungry anymore, which was true. My appetite was like 0, which is really weird for me. Before I got sick, I just shoveled everything. I mean, I was in dance 5 days a week or more. So like always just eating whatever I could get my hands on. But instead of just like shoveling down food, I would order my favorite food at a restaurant, eat 2 bites, and then be like, I'm done. My friends did start to get worried. I lost a lot of weight in about 2 months. December 2012 to January 2013, I probably lost about 30 pounds. None of my clothes were fitting me, and for some reason I was just like, I don't know why. It couldn't have been the fact that I was going to the bathroom 20 plus times a day, bleeding every single time I went to the bathroom, not able to eat anything, but I wasn't in pain, which is very strange. I went through all of these symptoms. I had these terrible ulcers in my colon, which I could tell by the amount of blood that was coming out of me. but I didn't hurt. And I don't know if I just have like a really high pain tolerance, or that's just the way the disease is on me. I've noticed that now the symptoms that show up in a flare usually are like the physical symptoms before I start feeling pain, which is kind of strange. I don't know. So finally in January 2013, probably about a week in, I started having pain, and I couldn't eat without being in pain. It was like my body like held off for a year and a half beforehand, no pain whatsoever, and then like every time I ate, I felt like I was gonna die. It was awful. I was crampy, I was cranky. It wasn't good at all. And I finally went up to my mom and was like, there is something wrong with me and I need you to take me to the doctor. Now before this, of course, I was 18 at this time. I had done some research online and I was really scared because there were two options of what I could have had given my symptoms. I knew that there was something wrong with me as I started getting worse. Obviously, I was Googling it and WebMDing it and all of those things that you probably shouldn't do and just go to a doctor. But I didn't have health insurance. My mom had already blown me off earlier, so I was trying to figure it out on my own. And the two options I was given were inflammatory bowel disease or cancer. And they say that if you have these symptoms of cancer, you need to go in immediately because it means that it is advanced. So I was sitting here thinking that either I have this disease, which honestly I considered it a little bit, but my mind always goes to worst case scenario. So I'm like, I am a 18-year-old girl who is pooping blood 20 times a day. There is something seriously wrong with this. It has to be colon cancer. It's advanced and I'm probably going to die. I literally remember like going in my mind about how I was going to have to tell people that I was sick and that I wasn't going to be there, how I was going to have to tell my job or my parents, which, I mean, is terrifying. Like I almost gave myself a diagnosis beforehand, which you should not do. But it got to the point where I was scared enough and I was in enough pain that I looked at my mom and I was like, you need to take me to the doctor and you need to take me like now.